Eric Barnes hadn't meant to notice her. He was too busy chasing his 5-year-old daughter through the hotel lobby, while trying to keep his ancient backpack from falling apart. But there she was, sitting alone in a white wedding dress, mascara smudged, bouquet abandoned on the floor next to her heels. "Faye, slow down," he called, grabbing his daughter just before she darted past the velvet ropes into the ballroom. He scooped her up and turned, then froze. The woman didn't move. She looked like a ghost haunting the edge of the empty room, her fingers clenched around a flute of champagne that hadn't been touched. The music had stopped. The guests were gone. Only the flowers remained, lavish, expensive ones, the kind Eric had only ever seen in magazines. "You okay?" he asked before he could stop himself. She blinked and looked up at him, her eyes red but clear. "That's a loaded question." Eric shifted Faye to his other arm. "Sorry, I didn't mean to bother you, just kinda hard to miss someone in a wedding dress sitting in a ballroom alone." The woman let out a soft laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Fair." Faye tugged at his hoodie. "Daddy, is she a princess?" Eric smiled. "She might be." "Not anymore," the woman said, her voice quieter now. "The groom changed his mind, 15 minutes before the ceremony." Eric's smile faded. "Ouch." "Yahe." There was a long pause. Then Eric cleared his throat. "Look, I know I'm just some guy who wandered in for a delivery. Well, technically. I was supposed to pick up leftover catering for the community shelter, but I've got a 5-year-old who thinks you're Cinderella, and you look like you could use a grilled cheese and chocolate milk." That got a real laugh from her. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. We're headed back to my place anyway, tiny apartment, but the grilled cheese slaps. You're welcome to join." The woman looked at him like he was either crazy or the first human being to speak to her like. She wasn't broken porcelain. "I'm Kara," she said finally. "Eric, and this is Faye." "Hi, princess," Faye said brightly, and Kara smiled for the first time. Eric's apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen that barely fit a table, but it was warm and smelled like cinnamon and toast. Kara sat at the table while Eric cooked, Faye painting with markers at the other end of the table, humming to herself. "You really live here?" Kara asked quietly. "Yeah, it's not much, but it's home. I've had full custody since Faye was 2. Her mom's not around." Kara nodded, taking a bite of the grilled cheese. "This is amazing." Eric grinned. "Told you." She studied him like she was trying to figure something out. "You didn't ask for my story." "Didn't think it was my business." "No one's ever said that to me before." He shrugged. "Figure, if you want to tell me, you will." Kara stared at the melted cheese stretching between her fingers. "I was going to marry him because it made sense, not because I loved him. My parents loved him. He ticked all the boxes, but I kept hoping. Maybe one day I'd feel something." Eric leaned against the counter. "Sounds lonely." It was. Faye ran over and tugged on Kara's hand. "Want to see my room?" Kara blinked in surprise but nodded. "Sure." Eric watched them disappear down the hall, Kara lifting the hem of her dress to keep from tripping. Something tugged at his chest. He didn't know who she was or why she'd said yes to coming with a stranger and his daughter, but she looked more alive in that moment, crouching beside Faye's dollhouse, than she had in that fancy ballroom. Kara slept on the couch that night, curled under the extra quilt Faye insisted she use. Eric was up early, making coffee and trying not to think too hard about how peaceful she looked, hair spread across the pillow, mascara finally washed away. When she stirred, he handed her a mug. "Morning." "Please tell me that's coffee." "Only the best instant money can buy." She sipped it and smiled. "You're a good dad." "Try my best." Kara set the mug down and hesitated. "Should go." Eric nodded, even though he didn't want her to. You got somewhere to be. She looked down, not really. Then stay, at least for breakfast. Faye would be bummed if you left without saying goodbye. Kara looked up at him, eyes soft. You're really just kind, huh? Eric chuckled. Don't spread it around. I've got a tough reputation at the diner. She laughed, and something shifted between them, something small, but real. Later that afternoon, Kara stood by the front door, holding her heels and bouquet. Thanks for everything, she said. I mean it. Eric nodded. You sure you don't want a ride? I can borrow my buddy's truck. She shook her head. I've got someone picking me up. I just needed to not be there. Fair. Kara looked at him for a long second. You didn't ask me who I was. I didn't need to. She smiled. I'll see you again, Eric Barnes. And then she walked out the door, leaving behind the faint smell of roses and something heavier regret. That night, Faye sat on the couch beside Eric, clutching her teddy bear. Will she come back? Eric stared at the door. I don't know, kiddo. But you like her. He ruffled her hair. Yes, I do. And he did, even if he didn't know her last name, even if she belonged to another world, even if she'd probably never walk through that door again. What Eric didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Kara Lane hadn't just walked out of a wedding. She'd walked away from $1 million life. And she'd fallen in love with the poor dad, who offered her a grilled cheese. Eric didn't expect to see her again. 3 weeks passed. Life returned to its usual rhythm: early mornings at the diner, afternoons helping Faye with finger paints or fort building, nights spent balancing bills over half-sipped coffee. Kara became a memory, one that lingered in odd places: on the couch where she'd slept, in the kitchen when he made toast, in Faye's drawings where a woman with long hair held hands with a stick figure named Dad. He hadn't told anyone about her, not because he was hiding it, but because it felt like something delicate, something that might vanish if he said it out loud. One rainy Thursday, he was wiping down counter stools after closing when the bell over the door chimed. He didn't look up right away. Most people didn't come in this late unless they were lost or desperate. Is the grilled cheese still as good as I remember? His hand stilled. He turned. Kara stood in the doorway, umbrella dripping, trench coat belted tightly, her hair damp and curling at the ends. I was beginning to think I imagined you, he said. I wasn't sure you'd want me showing up. He gestured to the booth by the window. You want it with tomato soup or just the classic? She slid into the booth. Surprise me. He worked in silence, the sound of rain tapping the windows filling the space between them. When he brought the plate over, she looked up at him like he'd handed her something far more important than a sandwich. Thank you, she said. Anytime. She took a bite, then exhaled slowly. I needed to come back. I've been thinking about this place, and you. Eric leaned against the counter. You didn't exactly leave a way to find you. I know, I wasn't ready to explain anything. You ready now? Kara stirred the soup with her spoon, watching the swirl of color. My family owns Lane Consolidated. My father built it. My brother runs the finance division. I was supposed to marry into another legacy family to secure future alliances. Their words, not mine. Eric folded his arms, so it was all business. Since I was old enough to walk in heels. She looked up, her eyes sharper now. I left because I didn't want to become someone I hated. I stayed gone because didn't trust myself not to go back. He nodded slowly. So why are you here now? Because I didn't feel like I was pretending when I was with you and Faye. I felt real. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the register, flipped the sign to closed, and locked the door. Then he sat across from her. Faye still talks about you. She named one of her dinosaurs after you. It wears a paper towel veil. Kara laughed, the sound brighter this time. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever done for me. She's 5, the bar's low. I'm serious. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. You gave me something I didn't know I needed. Eric didn't pull away, but he didn't move closer either. What is this, Kara? Are you running away again, or are you coming back for something? She held his gaze. I don't know yet, but I want to find out. He nodded once. Then take your coat off. We're repainting the diner this weekend. If you want to be part of this world, you better be ready to get paint on your shoes. She grinned. What color? Whatever's on sale. That weekend, Kara showed up in jeans and a worn hoodie, her hair pulled back, no makeup. Faye handed her a brush like it was a knighthood, and they spent the day turning the dull beige walls into something brighter. Something that looked like it belonged to people who still believed in fresh starts. Later that night, they sat on the steps outside the diner, watching the last of the paint dry under the streetlights. My mother would faint if she saw me like this, Kara said, picking at a fleck of dried blue on her knuckle. Then we'll keep her away from the Instagram photos. I didn't take any. He looked at her sideways. No selfies, no proof. I didn't want this to be curated. I wanted it to be mine. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a key. This is to the back door, in case you ever want to come in early or stay late. She stared at it. You trust me that much? I trust what I saw when you played dolls with my kid and scrubbed paint off the floor with your bare hands. Kara took the key, her fingers closing around it. I'm not used to being trusted first. Then consider this your crash course. The next morning, Kara showed up with coffee from the expensive place across town and a box of pastries that didn't come in a plastic bag. She didn't ask for attention. She just helped Faye with her shoes and started wiping down tables like she belonged there. And somehow she did. But Eric still hadn't kissed her. Not because he didn't want to, but because he knew, deep in his gut, that whatever this was, whatever it could become, deserved to be real. Not rushed, not tangled up in old pain or new confusion. Still, he could feel it in the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching, in the way her hand brushed his when they passed each other in the narrow kitchen, in the way Faye whispered, "She's like family now, right?" when she thought he wouldn't hear. He didn't answer his daughter that night. But he stood at the window long after she fell asleep, watching the street below, wondering when the moment would come that changed everything. Because it was coming. And something told him, when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. Can't believe I'm doing this, Kara muttered under her breath as the elevator doors opened onto the 14th floor of the old building. She clutched the paper bag tighter, the scent of freshly baked banana bread rising into the hallway. This is insane. But she knocked anyway. Eric opened the door in a faded t-shirt, his hair damp like he'd just stepped out of the shower. He blinked at her. You bake. I needed to keep my hands busy, she said, holding out the warm bag. It's not much, but I tried. Eric took it, eyebrows lifting. Banana bread from a woman who used to have a personal chef. That's a plot twist. I never said I baked it well, Kara warned. You might want to sign a waiver. Faye's going to be thrilled. She thinks anything that smells like cake is cake. Where is she? Library with my neighbor's daughter. They do a book club on Saturdays. Mostly it's an excuse to eat cookies and argue about who gets to be the dragon. Kara smiled. That sounds like a very intense book club. Eric gestured toward the kitchen. Come in, I'll make coffee. As she stepped inside, Kara noticed a folded blanket on the couch and a stack of picture books on the floor. The small signs of a life messy, real, unguarded. She followed him into the kitchen, where he was already pouring water into the kettle. I've been thinking, she said, resting her hands on the counter. About work, about what comes next for me. Eric didn't look up. You mean after walking out on a high society wedding and ghosting your family? Yes, I mean after that. He turned around, leaning against the counter. So what's the plan? I don't have one, but I don't want to go back to the world it came from, not the way it was. I want to work, actually work, do something that matters. I thought maybe I could help out at the shelter. You mentioned it once. Eric nodded slowly. It's underfunded and chaotic, you'd hate it. I might. But I still want to try. He reached for 2 mugs. Then I'll take you Monday, just don't wear heels. Kara exhaled, her shoulders loosening. Thanks. They sat at the table, steam rising from their mugs. The banana bread sat untouched between them. I called my brother, Kara said after a pause. Eric looked up. That good or bad? I told him I wasn't coming back to the company. He took it better than I expected, offered to send a driver. Eric raised an eyebrow. Did you say yes? No, told him I'd figure it out on my own. He studied her. You're not used to that, are you? No, but it feels right. She tilted her head. What about you? What did you want to do before the diner? Didn't have much time for dreaming. I worked construction for a while. Then the diner job opened up right when I needed something with steady hours and a boss who didn't ask too many questions. You're good at it. Making pancakes. Making people feel welcome. He glanced at her, and something shifted behind his eyes. You make it easy. The air between them thickened, charged with something unspoken. Kara looked away first. I should probably go, she said, rising from the table. Give you your Saturday back. Eric stood too. You sure? I'm not good at staying in one place too long. Old habit. He walked her to the door. As she reached for the handle, he hesitated. Kara. Yes. I don't know what this is yet, but I know it's not nothing. She turned to face him, her hand still on the door. That makes 2 of us. A beat passed. Then he leaned forward, not a kiss, not quite. Just his forehead resting against hers, a breath shared, a moment held. I'll see you Monday, she whispered. Bring gloves, and maybe a backup banana bread. She laughed, soft and real, then slipped out into the hallway. That night, Eric found a note tucked into the paper bag. I never had a reason to bake for anyone before. You and Faye gave me that. Okay. He folded it carefully and slid it into the drawer beside the takeout menus and mismatched napkins. Then he looked out the window, the city lights flickering below, and wondered how someone who'd walked into his life in a wedding dress could feel more like home than anything he'd ever known. Monday came fast. The shelter was a converted church basement with peeling paint and more need than resources. Kara arrived in jeans and an old sweatshirt Eric loaned her from the diner's lost and found bin. It was 2 sizes too big and smelled faintly of coffee grounds. Welcome to organized chaos, Eric said as they stepped inside. The air was thick with the scent of stew and disinfectant. Volunteers bustled around folding clothes, sorting canned goods, and checking in families. Kara moved with quiet determination, her hands unsure at first, but her eyes sharp. She took direction without flinching, stacked crates, handed out blankets, and made jokes with a teenage girl who refused to wear anything that wasn't black. Eric watched her from across the room as she knelt beside a woman trying to calm a crying baby. Kara didn't flinch at the noise or the mess. She didn't retreat. She stayed. When the day ended, she stood by the doorway, hair frizzed from humidity, dirt under her nails. I forgot how good exhaustion could feel, she said. You didn't have to stay the whole day. I wanted to. They walked back to the diner in silence. The air was cooler now, dusk settling over the street. You're different here, Eric said finally. I'm more myself here than I ever was in silk and diamonds. He stopped walking, she did too. You know Faye keeps asking when she can call you family. Kara blinked, caught off guard. She does. She asked me last night if you were her almost mom. Kara's voice dropped. And what did you say? I said maybe, if we're lucky. Kara stepped closer. What if I'm the one who's lucky? This time he didn't hesitate, he kissed her. It wasn't perfect. Their noses bumped, and she still had dirt on her cheek, and they were standing next to a dumpster behind the diner. But it was real. And for both of them, it was the beginning of something they never thought they'd have. Something earned. Something worth keeping. Kara stood in front of the mirror in the back room of the diner, tying her apron with fingers that still didn't quite move like they belonged in a place with grease-slicked counters and chipped mugs. Outside, the dinner rush was building. Rain tapped against the glass, and from the kitchen came the familiar clatter of pans and the sound of Eric's low voice directing orders. She'd been working here for 3 weeks now unpaid, by choice. She said it was temporary, that she just needed to feel useful. But somewhere between learning how to refill the coffee machine and memorizing the regulars' orders, she stopped checking her phone for messages from her family. Stopped wondering if she'd made a mistake. Hey, Eric said, pushing open the door, his sleeves rolled up to his elbows. You okay? Yeah, she said, adjusting the way her hair was tied back. I'm just not used to smelling like burgers after 6. Could be worse, he said. You could smell like bleach and regret. Kara laughed, turning to face him. You've been hanging around me too long. You're getting sarcastic. Don't blame yourself. I've always been like this. You just notice now. She stepped closer, brushing a speck of flour off his shoulder. I notice a lot of things now. His gaze didn't waver. Faye's with my cousin tonight. They're building a pillow fortress, apparently. We've got 2 hours before she demands a bedtime story and a second glass of milk. Kara tilted her head. Is that code for something? It's code for put on something that doesn't smell like onions. I'm taking you somewhere. She narrowed her eyes. You. He wiped his hands on a towel. Found a place. No menus. Just a guy with a guitar and a tiny kitchen that makes food like it's a love letter. She hesitated. Do I need to change? He looked at her hair tied back, cheeks flushed from the heat of the kitchen, flour on her arm, and shook his head. You already look perfect. The place was in a converted brownstone, tucked between a locksmith and a dry cleaner. No sign, just a red door and the faint sound of music inside. Kara followed Eric through the small dining room where couples leaned close over mismatched candles. A man in the corner played something slow and aching on an old guitar. They sat at a table near the window. No server came. Instead, a tall woman in an apron brought out 2 bowls of something steaming and fragrant, then walked away without a word. Kara took a bite and closed her eyes. Okay, I'm impressed. I thought you might be. She looked at him across the table. You know, there's something strange about all this. What? I was surrounded by luxury my whole life. But this mismatched table, this food, this moment, it feels more extravagant than anything I ever had. Eric didn't speak for a moment. Then, maybe wealth isn't what you thought it was. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. I think I'm figuring that out. They left the restaurant just after 9. The rain had stopped, leaving the streetlights to shimmer against the wet pavement. Kara walked slowly, her heels clicking softly against the sidewalk. So, she said, glancing at him, what happens now? Eric stopped walking. I've been asking myself the same thing. And I don't want you to leave. She turned to face him fully. I'm not planning to. I mean really stay, not just in the diner. not just for Faye, with me. Kara's breath caught. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I don't have a ring, Eric said. And I probably can't promise you a yacht or a villa. But I can promise you pancakes on bad days and someone who will always notice if you're sitting alone. Kara stepped forward, her eyes shining. I don't want a ring right now. I want this, you, Faye, a life that's messy and real. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. You still don't care that I'm just a guy with a kid and a diner. She smiled. You're the man who offered a stranger a grilled cheese and gave her a reason to believe in love again. That's worth more than anything ever inherited. From behind them, a taxi horn honked. Kara laughed, and Eric pulled her into his arms. Later that week, she brought her family to the diner. Not all of them, just her brother, Daniel, the only one who ever saw her as more than an asset. He looked painfully out of place in his tailored charcoal coat and Italian shoes, but he didn't flinch when Eric handed him a mug with a chipped handle or when Faye offered him a crayon drawing of Uncle Dan and the Pancake Castle. So, Daniel said, once Kara had stepped away to help a customer, you're the man. Eric leaned on the counter. Depends who you ask. She's happy. I know. Daniel folded his hands. If you ever hurt her. I won't. There was a pause, then Daniel nodded once. Good. That night, Kara stood in the back alley with Eric, watching the last of the trash bags get picked up by the truck. You're sure? He asked. She rested her head on his shoulder. I've never been more sure. I love this life. I love you. I love that kid. And I love who am when I'm with you. He turned her gently, hands at her waist. Then let's build something. No rings, no contracts, just us. She leaned in, their foreheads touching, grilled cheese and all. They kissed beneath the buzzing light above the alley door, the city moving quietly around them. Inside, Faye waited with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her eyes already heavy with sleep. You're back, she said as they stepped in. Kara knelt beside her, always. Eric watched them, something deep and quiet settling in his chest. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like he was surviving. He felt like he was home. And beside him stood the woman who had walked away from everything that glittered only to find something brighter waiting in the warmth of a tiny diner, and a life built from love. Kara stood in the center of the shelter's multipurpose room, surrounded by folding chairs and a sea of mismatched tablecloths. Her hands were covered in paint again, this time from the handmade banner she and the teenagers had worked on all morning. It read, Community Family Night. Eric entered from the back hallway, wiping his hands on a towel, the sleeves of his button-up rolled to his elbows. He paused when he saw her, taking in the way she was laughing with one of the older volunteers, her hair swept up in a clip, her cheeks flushed from effort. You're staring, she said as he approached. I'm allowed. She handed him a roll of tape. These table signs still need to go up. He took the supplies, brushing his fingers across hers. You know, there was a time you wouldn't have touched duct tape without gloves. That version of me used to cry if her nail polish chipped, she said, tilting her head. I like this one better. Me too. The event had been her idea, an open dinner for the neighborhood with free food, music, and games for the kids. It was simple, joyful, and nothing like the black tie galas she used to endure back when her life was scheduled in 15-minute increments. The shelter's director, a sharp-eyed woman named Mrs. Rayner, approached them as the first families began arriving. You're a miracle worker, Kara, she said, adjusting her glasses. We haven't had this much turnout in over 2 years. I just filled in the gaps, Kara replied. The community did the rest. Mrs. Rayner gave a short nod. Well, if this is what filling in looks like, I'd hate to see what you could do with a real budget. Eric glanced at Kara. Funny you mention that. They hadn't told anyone yet, not even Faye. But over the past few weeks, Kara had been quietly liquidating a portion of the trust she'd refused to touch for years, enough to fund the shelter's renovations, expand its services, and secure long-term resources. She stepped forward. I have something I'd like to announce. Eric watched her walk to the front of the room, where the mic sat unused on a folding stand. Hi, she said, her voice clear. I know most of you only met me recently, and I know I don't have history here, but this place saved me in more ways than I can explain, and I want to be part of its future. The room quieted as she continued. Starting next month, we'll be launching new programs: job training, childcare support, and legal aid, and we're expanding our space to accommodate all of it. I've already spoken with Mrs. Rayner. The funding's handled. There was a beat of silence before the applause began, tentative at first, then swelling into something real and resounding. Eric didn't clap. He just looked at her and felt something shift in his chest. Later, as they stood together beneath the string lights outside, Kara leaned into him. You didn't say anything. I didn't need to. You've already said everything that matters. She looked at him, her expression soft. I want to build something that lasts, Eric, not just for them, for us. We already are. I mean officially. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, folded envelope. I bought this last week. He took it, frowning as he opened it. Inside was a hand-drawn invitation, written in blue marker. You, me, courthouse next Saturday. He looked up. You proposing to me? Well, you're taking too long, she said with a grin. He stepped closer, cupping her face. Then yes, absolutely yes. She kissed him, and the lights above flickered with the wind. They stayed there for a long time, wrapped in warmth that had nothing to do with the weather. The ceremony was small. Just Faye, Daniel, Mrs. Rayner, and a few of the shelter staff who'd become family over time. Kara wore a simple dress she'd found at a vintage shop, and Eric wore the same shirt he'd worn the day they'd painted the diner. Faye held the rings in a velvet pouch and insisted on twirling during the vows. Afterward, they returned to the diner, now closed for the day, where Kara had hung photos of the three of them on the wall, snapshots of a life they'd built from nothing but trust, laughter, and a second chance. Daniel approached Eric quietly as Kara danced with Faye by the jukebox. She's never been more grounded, he said. Eric nodded. She's the strongest person I know. Daniel clinked his glass gently against Eric's. Don't forget it. That night, they returned to the apartment, the same one that hadn't changed much, except now there were 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom, and a new coat rack by the door that Kara insisted on buying because grown-ups should have a place to hang things. As Eric locked the door behind them, Kara slipped off her shoes and crossed to the living room, where Faye had already fallen asleep on the couch under a blanket she'd refused to part with since the shelter event. Kara bent down, lifting her gently. I've got her. Eric followed, drawing back the covers in Faye's room. Kara tucked her in, smoothing the hair from her face, her expression unreadable. When they returned to the hallway, Eric caught her hand. You okay? She nodded, then leaned into him. I didn't think I'd ever want this, not like this. A home, a family, something quiet and permanent. He kissed her temple, and now. She looked up at him. Now can't imagine anything else. They stood there for a moment, the hum of the city outside the only sound. Then Eric scooped her up and carried her down the hall, ignoring her laughter. Seriously, she said, you're going to throw your back out. Worth it. They collapsed onto their bed, limbs tangled, laughter fading into something deeper. In the months that followed, the shelter thrived. The diner became a second home for the volunteers and families who came through its doors. Faye started school and insisted on bringing extra snacks in case someone forgot theirs. Kara balanced grant proposals with pancake flipping, and Eric found himself with more help than he knew what to do with. But more than anything, they had each other. Not because they needed to be saved, but because they'd chosen each other freely, completely, and without hesitation. In the quiet moments, early morning coffee, late-night movie marathons, the way Kara fit perfectly beneath Eric's arm, they found a rhythm that was theirs alone. It wasn't perfect. It was better. And it lasted.